Hello, my name is Don Vaselli. I prepared this presentation on regenerative agriculture for you to use when you speak to your state member of Congress regarding the 2023 Farm Bill. So let's begin. Thank you for this opportunity to give this presentation on regenerative agriculture, solution to climate change. My name is Don Vaselli. I'm a climate reality project leader trained in 2020 and a member of the Chicago Metro chapter. I serve on several committees and am the chairperson for the Regenerative Agriculture Campaign Committee. Today, I plan to briefly cover the listed topics in this presentation. Climate change is undeniable, the carbon cycle, regenerative agriculture definition, carbon sequestration definition, RA principles, practices, and more. A paradigm shift, benefits of RA, pace of change, tilling practices, the 2023 Farm Bill, and Q&A, how you can contact me to get, which I will respond as soon as possible. A little bit about my background. I was raised on a 160-acre family dairy farm in Weberville, just outside of East Lansing, Michigan. I am a retired product marketing professional. Most of my experience was in product marketing for data communication, telecommunication, cellular, and wireless internet companies in the Chicagoland area. I graduated from Michigan State University in advertising and marketing. I received my MBA from Lake Forest Graduate School of Management. I officially retired in 2015 and keep busy with volunteer work and my writing hobby. I grew up on a small family farm in central Michigan before I left for college. I spent 10 years helping my parents farm the land using traditional farming practices. Organic farming was not in our vocabulary. Regenerative agriculture practices were not known or practiced at the time. Farmers in the late 50s and early 60s probably would have looked unfavorably upon any farmers trying to turn away from conventional farming practices. This was my family farm around 1960. We had 160 acres that included around 30 acres of woods and wetland. My family moved from a suburb in Detroit to the farm in 1956. We raised milking cows with pigs, goats, horses, and other animals. We planted corn, wheat, rye, oats, and clover or alfalfa to feed the cows. It was a traditional family farm with around 110 acres of tillable land. I spent 10 years of my life farming before leaving for college. I never thought I would be involved with farming again. My father would be amazed at what is happening with farmers and ranchers today. There was no emphasis at all on regenerative farming practices as we know it today. Climate change was not on anyone's radar screen. Soil health was not the primary focus of farmers' concern at the time. Only how much yield per acre could be achieved on the land. After I went to college, my father switched from dairy cows to beef cattle. He sold a few beef cattle each year for tax purposes. He ended up having some of the oldest cows in the state. Michigan State University found out and came out to look at them, since most dairy cows and beef cattle live less than 5 years. Some of the cows were over 10 years old. The productive lifespan of average cows is between 2.5 and 4 years in most developed dairy industries. Cows calve for the first time at 2 years of age, which brings their total lifespan from birth to death between 4.5 to 6 years. The natural life expectancy of dairy cattle is approximately 20 years, however. Age at slaughter typically can be from 12 to 22 months of age for the high quality grade market. The reason for the range in age is that some calves are weaned and go directly to a feeding facility and are finished for slaughter. Many beef, pork, cattle, chicken, and turkeys today are raised in large confined animal feeding operations called CAFOs, which do more harm than good to our environment. Now I want to focus on climate change. When I was growing up in the 50s and 60s on the farm, the climate was pretty predictable. Then it started to change. The 1967 blizzard caught many Michigan residents off guard. In several locations, the temperatures were in the 50s and 60s. And then a couple of days later, on January 26th and 27th, the blizzard dumped lots of really heavy snow in a relatively short period. In Lansing, the temperature was 66 degrees on January 24th, 1967. 2 days later, 24 inches of snow had fallen. I remember when winter was cold and long, with 40-mile-an-hour blizzards that would last all day, leaving snow drifts 10 plus feet high on either side of our road. We would dig tunnels in the snow drifts for fun, in spite of the danger. In the fall, starting in October, we would get rain drizzles that lasted for days. Once it didn't stop for 2 weeks, on and off. In the spring, it was cold until the end of May, then turned warm. Seasons were more predictable and operated like clockwork. In the summer, it would get hot and humid, but not last very long. We had a saying, if you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes. Sunny days never lasted more than 3 days in a row. The latest report from the UN's IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, states unequivocally that humans are the reason our climate is warming the planet. They call it a code red for humanity. This chart shows our average surface temperature has risen 1.2 degrees Celsius since 1850. The IPCC goal is to keep the temperature from rising over 1.5 degrees Celsius, around 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, by 2025 to prevent irreversible climate change events. Carbon dioxide, CO2, emissions is the reason the atmosphere is warming. These levels have already risen to historic levels. The chart shows that CO2 levels were consistently in the 260 to 300 parts per million range over the last 800,000 years. This data is from ice core samples that show historical CO2 concentration levels. Everything changed with the beginning of the industrial age, and especially in the last 50 years since World War II. The blue in this chart are the CO concentrations. See how they match the white temperature range. Here's another look at atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. Things changed dramatically after 1950. In 2013, CO2 levels surpassed 400 parts per million for the first time in recorded history. This graph shows even better how fast CO2 levels have risen since 1880. We averaged 315 parts per million of CO2 in our atmosphere in 1960. We reached a high of 424 parts per million in May of 2023. Since the industrial era began around 1750, CO2 concentrations have risen by about 50%. 19 of the hottest years on record have occurred since 2000. The three hottest in 2016, 2019, and 2020, with 2023 on target to be the hottest year yet. Greenhouse gases are measured in units called global warming potential, GWP. It measures how much heat each type of gas traps compared to carbon dioxide. Methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases trap much more heat than carbon dioxide. However, the other chart shows how much emissions of each type of gas is in our atmosphere. As you can see, carbon dioxide emits 76% of the gas in our atmosphere. I would like to shift now and talk about the carbon cycle. About 200 billion metric tons of carbon move throughout the planet. This includes the atmosphere, biosphere, plants and animals, soil, and ocean. We have knocked the carbon cycle out of balance, mostly by burning fossil fuels, but many other things as well, such as poor farming practices, contribute to the problem. Nature uses photosynthesis to draw down Nature uses photosynthesis to draw down excess carbon from our atmosphere. The lack of ground cover, deforestation, use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides and herbicides, and other practices prevent nature from doing its job. Our soil can store up to 10 gigatons of carbon every year if the soil is healthy. Currently, we are emitting around 11 gigatons of excess CO2 each year due to poor soil practices. So what is regenerative agriculture? Regenerative agriculture is a system of farming principles and practices that increase biodiversity, enriches soils, improve watersheds, and enhances the entire ecosystem of the farm. Through carbon sequestration, carbon is captured in the soil by pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere to reverse the damages caused by climate change. It offers increased yields, resilience to climate instability, improved soil health, and vitality for farming communities. What is carbon sequestration? Carbon sequestration is the long-term removal or capture of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to slow down or reverse atmospheric CO2 pollution and to mitigate or reverse global warming. Examples of carbon sequestration will follow. Let's start with regenerative agriculture. It tends to be governed by 5 basic principles. Minimum tillage to prevent erosion and build soil structure. Keep residue on soil to absorb moisture and protect the soil. Maintaining a living root system to absorb nutrients and feed microbes. Crop diversity, using cover crops and crop rotation to maintain soil health. Integrating livestock to fertilize plants and provide nutritional food. The effect of practicing regenerative agriculture is that it restores soil health. For farmers, this means greater yields, the resiliency of the soils to various stresses, droughts, and excess moisture. Decreased need for outside input costs, fertilizers and pesticides, and increased profits. For consumers, increases in soil health lead to more nutrient-dense food. A pollinator-friendly environment, wildlife habitats, erosion control, pollution runoff control, and carbon sequestration through photosynthesis, thus helping to reverse climate change. In short, it helps to solve many of the world's environmental problems. Regenerative agriculture includes these key industrial practices. This includes things like crop rotation, no or low-till plowing, use of cover crops, animal grazing, composting, agroforestry, and more. Through the practices of regenerative agriculture, the soil health can be restored, enabling a greater level of carbon sequestration to be achieved with the use of these agricultural practices. Some of these practices will also help to increase the soil's ability to sequester carbon on pasture land. Here is another look at the types of regenerative agriculture practices farmers can use to improve soil health. Through the use of these methods, soil health can be restored, enabling a greater level of carbon sequestration to be achieved without the use of harmful and costly chemical additives. I will discuss the increasing biodiversity component in more detail later in this presentation. Here is an example of carbon sequestration from growing cover crops. Cover crops are different from growing cash crops sold for profit, such as corn or soybeans. Cover crops are used to improve soil health by protecting from soil erosion and nutrient loss. Cover crops help control weeds, pests, and other diseases and hold more water in the soil. The right cover crops increase biodiversity and provide nutrients for plant growth without the need for chemical inputs like fertilizers. Here's an example of carbon sequestration from no-till farming practice. No-till plowing builds healthy soil that increases the amount of carbon sequestration and water absorption, leading to higher crop yields. Soil microorganisms live in healthy soil, which increases nutrient cycling, suppressing plant diseases to grow more nutrient-dense crops. When soil is plowed, carbon is released into the atmosphere, increasing greenhouse gas emissions that warm the planet. This slide shows the type of tillage method used by 75% of U.S. farmers in 2017. No-till, no plowing, was used on 37% of U.S. cropland. Low-till, reduced plowing, was used on 35% of U.S. cropland. Conventional plowing was used on 28% of U.S. cropland. We need a higher percentage of farmers to practice no or low-tilling methods to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050 to mitigate climate change effects. No-till percentages are growing in the U.S. Companies such as Cargill are promoting adoption. Cargill plans to advance RA practices among row crops. They plan to implement RA on 10 million acres of farmland and ranches in North America by 2030. General Mills plans to advance RA practices on 1 million acres of farmland by 2030. Other food producers are planning similar programs. It is estimated that global food system accounts for about 33% of greenhouse gas emissions and 70% of water consumption. Here's another chart showing similar results we have discussed. Growth in low-till and no-till farming is growing steadily, especially in the coastal regions. As mentioned earlier, around 37% of tillable acreage in the U.S. is no-till and 35% is reduced tillage. This chart actually shows how fast RA practices are growing worldwide. RA practices have increased 15% per year on average since 2008, or 93% over the last 10 years. This equals around 14.7% of total global cropland per a recent food and agricultural study. This is very good, but it must change even faster to stop climate change and reverse global warming by 2050. Can we really reverse climate change with regenerative agriculture? The answer is yes, definitely. We can reverse climate change and stop global warming using nature's own solutions for pulling CO2 out of our atmosphere. The solutions can be implemented today. We don't have to wait for technological solutions that are costly, mostly unproven, and potentially harmful to our environment. We can use nature's own solutions. I will show you how this is done in the following slides. How can we do this? By using soil as a carbon sink to pull down carbon dioxide from our atmosphere naturally. This is called carbon sequestration. This is a natural process that can restore balance and stop global warming. It is possible to pull down more carbon than we emit each year with the right land management practices. So what is carbon sequestration? Plants draw down carbon dioxide through photosynthesis and pass the carbon sugar molecules through its root systems. Soil carbon comes from organic matter decomposition, which is, if not covered, is released back into our atmosphere. Soils store 3.67 times more carbon than exists in the atmosphere. Plants absorb atmospheric carbon dioxide during photosynthesis, returning plant residues into the soil, contributing to soil carbon. Much of this carbon ultimately returns to the atmosphere as soil microbes decompose, releasing carbon dioxide. Soil carbon stores can increase if the rate of carbon inputs exceeds the rate of microbial decomposition. Carbon sequestration refers to this process of storing carbon in soil organic matter and thus removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Maintaining living root systems are the key to regenerative agriculture practices. Roots store carbon and feed the microorganisms that in turn provide nutrients for plants. Together they build healthy soil needed to regenerate the land and help mitigate global warming. How this works is explained in the next slide. It's called the nutrient cycle. This is a nutrient cycle as defined by Dr. Elaine Ingham's Soil Food Web. Nature uses plant root systems to grow and feed microorganisms in healthy soil called soil organic matter, SON. This biology is what creates healthy soil to grow plants. There are three principles that need to be understood. 1. Nature exists as a series of relationships with each organism, playing a role as shown in this slide. 2. Nutrient cycling is key. Organisms consume what they need to live and grow and changes nutrients into food sources beneficial for other organisms. 3. Diversity is key. Different organisms cycle nutrients for each predator or prey. The whole system is needed to maintain the food web. Healthy soil is approximately 45% minerals, 25% water, 25% air, and 5% organic matter. Microorganisms require air and water to survive and grow to feed plants and build healthy soil. Plowing destroys the structure needed for microorganisms and results in compacted dirt that cannot absorb water or prevent soil erosion and pollution runoff. Building healthy soil is the key to regenerative agriculture practices. Now that we know how carbon is stored on our planet, we can turn our attention to the condition of our topsoil and how farmers can benefit from implementing regenerative agriculture practices. First, here are some facts. The Midwest Corn Belt farmland has lost a third of its carbon-rich topsoil through erosion. Generating 3 centimeters of topsoil takes nature up to 1,000 years. Only 60 years of farming left if soil degradation continues, per a UN official. About a third of our world's soil has already been degraded per the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. This slide shows the extent of soil degradation in the world. 3.2 billion people are suffering now. Agriculture needs to close the 11 gigaton gap between carbon emissions and CO2 drawdown to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. Regenerative agriculture practices can easily achieve this goal if healthy soil farming practices are implemented by all farmers and ranchers. This slide shows what regenerative agriculture does. It shifts the paradigm. Instead of competing with nature, we partner with nature. We stop using conventional industrial or factory farming methods that rely on monoculture crops, synthetic fertilizers, and deforestation to feed animals. All of this is causing desertification of our topsoil at a rate that will result in the loss of 2/3 of our landmass to deserts by 2100. We need to cover the soil when not in use. Now we can turn to the benefits of regenerative agriculture, not only to farmers and ranchers, but for the world. Benefit number 1, regenerative agriculture can decrease greenhouse gas emissions. RA is a key solution to climate change. Agriculture alone is directly responsible for about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions, most of which are methane and nitrous oxide. Together with all land and food production, RA accounts for about 25% of greenhouse gas emissions. We currently release 43 to 50 gigatons of CO2 into our atmosphere each year. Studies have shown that implementing RA practices can pull down or sequester up to 37.7 or more tons of CO2 per hectare per year. That's equal to 15.3 tons per acre per year. If only 5 to 10% of worldwide farmers practice RA, we can sequester more than 100%, 45.12 gigatons versus those 43 gigatons of the carbon we release into our atmosphere each year. If 100% of farmers practiced RA, we can effectively sequester more than 80 gigatons of carbon per year. Benefit number 2. RA, regenerative agriculture, has the potential to reverse climate change. If we can decrease the amount of greenhouse gas emissions in our atmosphere each year, we can potentially reverse climate change. This is another study from the Rodell Institute on the effectiveness of RA practices. The majority of greenhouse gas emissions come from carbon dioxide, around 38 out of 55 gigatons per year. Regenerative grazing systems and cropping systems alone can draw down 55 gigatons of CO2 each year if practiced globally. Benefit number 3. Regenerative agriculture improves yields and nutrition. These results per acre are based on farm trials by the Rodell Institute in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, over decades of testing. Farm yields using no-till, no plowing, practices are competitive or better than conventional till methods after a 5-year transition period. However, in extreme weather conditions, organic systems out-yield conventional up to 40%, using 45% less energy and releasing 40% fewer carbon emissions. Benefit number 4. Regenerative agriculture produces greater profits for farmers. This study of 20 farms showed that although crop yields were lower by 29%, regenerative agriculture systems had 70% higher profits than conventional methods. The main reason for increased profits was due to using less inputs, such as seed and fertilizer. Added benefits included increased soil organic matter and diversity of insects that decreased the number of harmful pests, leading to stronger crops. Benefit number 5. Regenerative agriculture creates drought and flood resistant soil. Soil organic matter, SOM, determines the rate and quantity of surface water infiltration to reduce runoff and soil erosion during extreme weather conditions. Each 1% increase of soil organic matter holds up to 20,000 gallons more water per acre. Most farmlands today average less than 3 to 4% soil organic matter. This has caused severe soil erosion and fertilizer runoff pollution in many states. This makes it difficult to prevent crop loss during droughts and floods. Benefit number 6, regenerative agriculture nurtures biodiversity. Biodiversity is fundamental to agriculture production and food security. The lack of biodiversity has resulted in reliance on monoculture crops that are highly susceptible to hot weather events, disease, and pests, as well as the loss of insects such as the bees that are needed to pollinate our crops. Just as important is the loss of microbes in our soil that are needed to create healthy soils, plants, and animals. Benefit number 7, last but not least, regenerative agriculture protects waterways. RA practices increase water retention and decreases runoff pollution. Clean water is one of the biggest environmental priorities of the world today. Industrial agriculture is producing crisis-level runoff pollutions that are devastating to our rivers, streams, and oceans. The Mississippi River watershed crosses 22 states and carries nitrogen and phosphorus pollution runoff all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, where it has created one of the largest toxic dead zones in the world, 6,334 square miles. So, what is the 2023 Farm Bill? This is a quote from Regenerate America's campaign website. They are part of Kiss the Ground's coalition to promote new policies for the Farm Bill. The 2023 Farm Bill covers many different areas of legislation dealing with the agricultural system. The Farm Bill is one of the most important pieces of legislation passed by Congress. The total estimated cost of the new Farm Bill may be around $500 billion over 5 years, over $1.3 trillion over 10 years. It is renewed every 5 to 7 years. The next update is this year, 2023. The Farm Bill is composed of 12 titles, as shown in this chart, or areas as shown in this chart. The Chicago Metro Chapter, Regenerative Agriculture Campaign Committee, and the Climate Reality Project Regenerative Agriculture Coalition have created 6 policy recommendations for the 2023 Farm Bill that deal with several of these areas. Climate Reality Project leaders and chapter members have held several meetings with congressional staff members of Congress advocating for these RA and agroforestry policies. We hope Congress adds climate-smart agriculture policies to the new Farm Bill that reduces greenhouse gas emissions each year to help reverse global warming. Here are our top reasons for adding regenerative agriculture policies to the 2023 Farm Bill. Implement climate-smart policies to mitigate climate change and meet UN emission reduction goals. Stop industrial farming practices that are degrading our topsoil, polluting our rivers, lakes, and streams, and oceans. Help farmers and ranchers reduce input costs and increase profits. Increase crop yields in extreme weather conditions. Increase nutrient values in our food supply. Greatly reduce CO2 emissions by sequestering more carbon in our soil than we release into our atmosphere. All of these are important to us. We need to stop the current farming practices that are harming our environment and emphasize the great potential of sequestering carbon back into our soil to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2040 or sooner. We can do all of this with the new Farm Bill. What you can do to help. Here's a list of what Climate Reality Project members can do to help in this effort to promote RA solutions to climate change. Start a regenerative agriculture committee within your own chapter if appropriate. Join our CRP, Regenerative Agriculture Coalition movement on Reality Hub, Nature-Based Solution Group, to participate in events. Join other RA organizations, promote RA practices throughout action alerts and advocacy efforts. Work with us to create awareness of RA's potential to stop climate change. Meet with Ag Committee members and members of Congress to advocate for climate-smart farm bills. Buy organic food products and support organic farmers. With your help, we can make a real difference. How can individuals help? Support regenerative farmers by looking for companies and foods that contain the regenerative organic certified ROC label. Here are some products to look for in your stores. There are more products being discovered or added to our food supply every month now. I encourage you to look for them in your store and purchase them to support this effort. Here are more things you can do. Ask questions at farmer markets. Do you grow organic crops? Are your crops diversified? Do you use no-till, cover crops, or other regenerative agriculture methods to grow crops? Do you use synthetic fertilizers or pesticides? Do you use rotational animal grazing methods? Are you ROC certified? And many other questions you could ask them. Finally, educate yourself about regenerative agriculture. Here are some names of organizations you can check out on your own. They have numerous educational documents, videos, training materials, and case studies on regenerative farmers and ranchers. Once empowered, you can contact your legislator and tell them what can be done to stop and even reverse climate change. To end this present, I normally show a YouTube trailer from Regenerate America on regenerative agriculture. It's a very inspirational video. It's only about 8 minutes long. It doesn't record well over the internet through a presentation like this, so I'm just going to skip it. But here is the URL site that you can go to and listen to it. And I also highly recommend you watch Kiss the Ground, available on Netflix, free of charge. And Kiss the Ground has a new one coming out now called Common Ground. And they're hosted by celebrities, and they're very well done, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to talk to you today. This completes my presentation on regenerative agriculture, solution to climate change. For questions and answers, please send me your questions to my email address, vasily@comcast.net. I'll get back to you promptly. Well, thank you. I'm going to end this slideshow and stop the screen share. So that was my presentation on regenerative agriculture. I've been studying and researching this through my committee work through the Climate Reality Project, Chicago Metro Chapter, for over 2 years now. We're very active, advocating whenever possible with our state legislatures, members of Congress who have to vote on the Farm Bill in 2023. Currently, it's in draft stage. Money starts running out into September. Congress needs to vote on something by the end of the year. But if not, it'll continue into 2024, and we'll continue our efforts to get some climate smart policy recommendations in this new Farm Bill. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope to hear from you through emails. Thank you.